There's certainly a lot of news right now. Chuck Schumer has announced they will cave. Democrats will support Donald Trump's continuing resolution, but that is not the immediate breaking news. Right now, Sean Farash has tweeted out that he is currently being swatted. So this started about a half an hour ago. And on it is, if you're not familiar with this gentleman, he's a Trump impersonator. He's a comedian. This may not be individually the biggest story. However, another prominent personality, Gunther Eagleman, announced that he was swatted. Nick Sorter said his family was swatted. A reporter for InfoWars was swatted twice. And on top of that, another a reporter from InfoWars was just murdered. With the escalation of violence we've seen at Tesla dealerships, and now it seems that there is a coordinated campaign swatting the homes of several prominent right-wing personalities. This is a dramatic escalation in overt terrorism. I want everyone to understand swattings are not pranks. They are done with the intention to murder the individual. Though they rarely do, they have. One famous story from, I believe it was a year or so ago. Someone got swatted. The police outside called him the bullhorn to leave his home. He walked outside and the cops killed him because the cops didn't know what was going on. So now we have individuals being swatted. We've got 4 or 5 different individuals who have faced these swattings just in the past couple of days. You add in the InfoWars story, you add in the Tesla story, it's getting particularly worrisome. So we decided we'll lead off with this story. Of course, there's another viral story in this vein where a street pastor, I believe it was in San Francisco, had a trans person point a gun at his face point blank. Now, some people are saying, so what? It's not a real gun. We don't know for sure, but this is getting particularly crazy. So we'll talk about that. And then, oh man, you know it's a slow news day when the big news is social drama. Candace Owens and the Daily Wire are back at it again. This is a massive back and forth as a report was released with several authors, one of which is Jordan Peterson, saying that the phrase Christ is King has been hijacked by extremists. And then you get the Daily Beast saying it's time for MAGA to get rid of their anti-Semites. And, then, Candace and Dr. Peterson and Andrew Klavan, everybody's tweeting up a big storm right now over the phrase Christ is King, which is trending, and whether or not people are wrong to use it. So we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll get into some other stories. Before we get started, my friends, we have an amazing sponsor. It is Hallow. Find God's peace in prayer. It's the #1 Christian prayer and meditation app, but don't take it from me. Mary Morgan actually uses it.
Yes, I am happy to promote Hallow, not only as a Catholic, but also someone who uses Hallow myself. We're now a week into Lent, which is the 40 days leading up to Easter, filled with prayer, fasting, almsgiving, sacrifice, and surrender. Historically, this is a very powerful season to grow closer to God, and Hallow is bringing you a great way to do that with their Lent Pray 40 challenge, which you can join right now. It's not too late, although it's been a week. This is a great time to grow in faith and grow your relationship with God. And the challenge that they have is called The Way. It will help us focus on how Jesus is the way to heaven. As he shows us, the way includes sacrifice that leads to peace, joy, healing, and love. Join Jonathan Rumi from The Chosen, Father Mike Schmitz from the Bible in a Year podcast, Mark Wahlberg, and more in praying every day leading up to Easter. It's already shaping up to be their biggest Lent ever, with thousands of people praying together all over the world. You can get 3 months for free when you sign up at hallow.com/Tim, and that will have you covered throughout the Lenten season. When you join, you'll find thousands of guided prayers, meditations, music, and much more, all to help you grow closer to God and find peace. Download the Hallow app and jump into the Lent Pray 40 challenge today.
Right on. Super cool. Thanks, Hallow, for sponsoring the show. We really do appreciate it. And thank you, Mary, for shouting them out as well. Yeah. Don't forget, we also got Boonies HQ skateboards, because these are American-made skateboards, cheaper than the Chinese and Mexican-made imported stuff from the big companies. We give our pro riders a bigger share of the royalties, and it is, as I mentioned, it's cheaper, so you can buy American products at a lower price. So when they come and they say, oh, Trump's tariffs are so bad, and they're making everything more expensive because wood comes from Canada and the boards are made in Mexico, I'm sitting here like, we had no problem making these boards in America. They're lying. What they're really bitching about is they want to squeeze every last drop of profit out while paying their workers and paying their team riders nothing. So I don't buy it. I'm a fan of the tariffs, but we'll talk about the tariffs too, because there's a Canadian sitting right here. Don't forget to also join Rumble Premium. you can use promo code TIM10. Check out the Green Room. Guys, the Green Room was awesome because Billboard Chris is here, and we are talking about some spicy things. You guys will really enjoy the Green Room podcast at rumble.com/Timcast IRL. Premium members only. Don't forget to smash the like button. Share this show right now. Everybody take that URL. Share it wherever you can. Largely because it helps the show. But also, let's get the word out about the degree of violence being experienced by people who want to share their thoughts and opinions online. This is serious stuff. You can follow me on X. And joining us to talk about this, joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more is Billboard Chris.
What's up? Thank you so much. The United States let me into the country again.
Good.
We're not at war yet, so it's good to be here.
Who are you? What do you do?
I'm Chris Elston, known as Billboard Chris, and for 4.5 years, I've been on a campaign to end what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, the crazy practice of trying to change the sex of children with puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. I'm called Billboard Chris because I wear signs. I go outside to busy downtown centers, universities, all across the world, doing this wild thing called having a conversation, because I believe one conversation at a time, we can put a stop to this child abuse. I upload those conversations. It helps educate people. And as we've seen the past couple of years, especially since Trump has become president again, we're making gigantic strides.
It is kind of amazing that just one day you strapped a sandwich board to yourself and went outside?
Yeah, I actually started it with a real billboard. There was a woman in England who put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, "I love J.K. Rowling," because she's spoken out about this issue. And
that's all it said. It said nothing else.
I heart J.K. Rowling, like the I heart New York logo. And they took it down because some people on Twitter complained. And part of this campaign for me is freedom of speech. I got tired of people getting fired from their jobs and feeling like they couldn't talk about this. I'm a dad of 2 girls, and I'm not sending my girls into a world that doesn't know what a woman is, and I'm not sending them into a world that's trying to change the sex of kids. So I got tired of freedom of speech coming under attack. I put up a big billboard that said the same thing, "I love J.K. Rowling." A Vancouver politician said it was hate speech. She pressured the sign company. They took it down.
Wow.
I then put up a whole lot of billboards all throughout the U.S. This is September 2020.
Wow.
Culminating with one in Times Square. But in Canada, I had no platform. I'm a nobody. I'm a regular dad living out in the suburbs. I used to be a financial advisor, but I wasn't going to let them silence me. So almost like a protest of them taking down my billboard, I had the sign made that said the same thing. And I had a sign made that said gender ideology does not belong in schools. And I went and stood where that billboard was. And I started talking to people. And then I started going downtown and then traveling Canada. And I haven't stopped. I quit my job, and this is all I do, trying to raise awareness.
And you've succeeded.
And I look ridiculous, but it works. So.
Well, right on. Thanks for hanging out. We got a lot to talk about. Mary's here.
Yes, I'm back. My name is Mary Morgan, and I co-host Pop Culture Crisis here at Timcast. We had Phil on today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Labonte. I'm the lead singer of the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm an anti-communist and a counter-revolutionary. Let's go.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the first tweet we have for you, actually, this is breaking news. Sean Farash, who's a Trump impersonator, tweeted, "I'm being swatted right now." He followed this up just about 15, 20 minutes ago, saying the sheriff's leaving the house now. So we will be checking for updates. We also had this tweet from Gunther Eagleman at 3:23. Of course, these are Sean. He's a comedian. He does Trump impersonations. If you've not heard it, they're quite good. They're funny. Gunther, of course, is a pro-Trump. He's a Trump supporter. I would say he's, I don't know, conservative is a fair estimate. He says the gloves are off. First off, my family is safe. My house was just swatted. Some ignorant F called in a fake hostage situation. Fortunately, I have good relations with law enforcement, and extra patrols will be added. I don't tolerate threats, and will find the culprit. This was their worst mistake. He says this won't stop me. I'm more determined than ever. Of course, we had this from Nick Sorter, where he posted this, I believe it was just this morning at 1 a.m. Both my dad and sister were swatted tonight. A dozen cops attempted to kick my dad's door in at gunpoint. This is literal effing terrorism, and the FBI should treat it as such. Before calling in the SWAT, the dumb-ish sent my sister an email calling me a Nazi, of course, so the motive is clear. And then, of course, from Post-Millennial, InfoWars host Chase Geyser swatted for a second time in 24 hours. This is over a period of just about 1 day. All of these people have been swatted. I'm concerned it's probably going to happen more. Donald Trump said the attacks in the Tesla facilities, the dealerships, will be treated as domestic terrorism. Mike Johnson said they are going to investigate these. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say, I think we're in for a hot summer of love 2.0, whatever you might expect. When we were talking about this yesterday, we actually had a caller in the uncensored portion of the show ask us, do we think it's going to be a crazy summer? And we said yes. Little did we know that only within a few hours, or in the next 10 or so hours, there would be several swattings of prominent right-wing personalities. Make no mistake, swattings are attempted murder. They don't always, and they rarely do, but the intention is so that police will kill the individuals. What they do is these people are calling in fake hostage situations where the cops believe they must storm in and save the life of individuals who are being threatened. There are several stories, but one in particular where a man was swatted over an argument about a video game. The police outside his home, bullhorn saying, "Come out of your house." He walked out and they shot and killed him. This is what they're trying to do to these personalities. I don't think we've seen the last of it.
I don't think we've seen the last of it. I mean, if you look at the temperature in the U.S., political temperature, I mean, clearly there's a lot of anger on the left, and they're lashing out in whatever way they can, whether it be swatting or they're, setting fire to Teslas and Tesla dealerships, shooting up Tesla dealerships, attempts on the president's life. The idea that this is just business as usual in the United States is a problem, and we need the FBI and the DOJ to come down on these people and throw the absolute book at them. I'm confident that the federal government can find out who these people are that are perpetrating these crimes. They should be picked up, and they should all be charged with terrorism, because that's the intent. It's political terrorism. There's no question about it. They're not swatting these people out of personal animus because, the guy didn't like the way he mowed his lawn or something. It was based on politics, and it's all aimed at the right. These people should be rounded up and put in jail for a long, long time.
I feel like that's unlikely to happen, though, because if you remember during Trump's first term, especially in the latter half, Antifa was incredibly active and yet did not face the consequences that you're hoping for.
I agree with you, and I hope that that's not the case.
Trump has a totally different administration this time. He's got way better people around him. We've already seen the first month of his presidency was probably the best month of any presidency in my lifetime. But is this ever going to go away? No, it's not, because for leftists, they believe that violence is resistance. They believe this is revolution. They believe they're justified in doing it. This is not new. This has gone on all over the world since the dawn of man. This is the same as the Bolsheviks in 1917 or the Red Guard in 1966. These people are communists, and they feel justified in doing their actions, so they're just looking for any excuse, and if they don't get it, they'll create one themselves.
I do think most of them are some form of communist, but I fear something worse. I think many of them are nihilists.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more than just anger, and it's more than just political extremism. They're feeling very resentful and disempowered right now. And when the right feels that way, instead we think about things and debate things and try our best to talk about our beliefs when we're not being censored, and we try to organize and do things in a politically sanctioned way. But as we can see, them, on the other hand, turn to violence.
Well, this is what the left will do. They'll get together an NGO because they're evil, and they'll get together some NGOs and some professors, and they'll say, okay, I got an idea. Let's create a group that we'll call the hard right, and we'll find 200 moderate conservatives, list them there. Then we'll find 10 psychopaths of disparate ideology, call them right-wing for some reason, and then claim we analyzed a group of over 300 right-wingers and found a high rate of violence and extremism. Then they release the report and say, this proves it. Then liberals go on YouTube and go on TV and say, look at the report that was just released by the Intelligence Institute. That proves it. And then you actually go in and you're like, I don't know. I think the guy who had a Star of David on his left cheek and a swastika on the right cheek was probably insane when he committed that act. And then what they do is they come out and they say, he was right-wing because he did X. Okay, the left at the highest level in politics have defended these people, have defended the violence. When a bunch of leftists set fire to a police station, where was the committee? Where was the George Floyd riot committee to go and investigate all of the riots across the country? Nowhere. In fact, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden helped fundraise for the people who got arrested in these crimes throughout these riots. Meanwhile, not a single person on the right has celebrated or defended any of the violence. In fact, When the McMichaels in the Ahmaud Arbery case got convicted, most conservatives came out and said, see, this proves we aren't racist. The media is still going to lie. They're still going to defend this. And it will always be a fact for anybody who's paying attention and knows what's going on. The left is violent. The right, and I mean the right as in regular Americans, they're not.
I still would like to see the administration do something. We do have a completely different DOJ. Well, I don't know about completely different. The people at the top are different in the DOJ. And the FBI is largely a different group of people at least people in the top. So, I mean, it's the only thing that I can really hope for, is that there'll actually be some kind of actual prosecution. Look at the way the 70s were, right? We were looking at it yesterday. There was I think it was in the first, from 71 to 72, there was 2,500 bombings in the U.S. And then throughout the rest of the 70s, there were, hundreds of bombings. So, I don't want to see that become the norm here now. I don't want to see that at all. So the only thing that we're left with is hoping the government does something about it.
Yeah, well, the bureaucracy is still dominated by Democrats. It's going to take time. 93% of the people who lived in Washington, D.C. voted for Kamala Harris. These are all the people running these three-letter agencies. So it takes some time to clean that up. It's going to take years. And we don't need just one term of Trump. We need 8 years of J.D. Vance to follow.
Yeah.
But I think with the guys at the top now leading all these different agencies, I think Trump's made great appointments and they will start cracking down on some of this. But they're all just individuals and one person can only do so much. So it's going to take time.
Well, I feel we're between a rock and a hard place. We want Cash, Pam Bondi, Dan Bongino. Now, with all due respect to Cash and Pam, if there's anybody I trust to get the job done at the FBI, it's going to be Dan Bongino. We like Cash. He's a sound, smart, honorable guy. We've talked to him. He's great. A lot of people were curious about Pam Bondi because not very many know much about her. She's a prosecutor in Florida, I believe. Everybody knows Dan. Dan has told us explicitly in no uncertain terms. So next week, Dan Bongino is officially going to be at the FBI. I'm excited. And I believe that he may actually take care of this stuff. He's not going to sit around watching this stuff happen. That being said, there's a rock and a hard place in that the left wants this to happen. They want police to show up and arrest some teenager, charge him with terrorism, because they're going to use that and they're going to lie about it and they're going to go recruit. But you have no choice.
We have to stop worrying.
Stop it.
We have to stop worrying about what the left cares about. Their opinions are totally irrelevant. You just have to do the right thing. And I think it's a positive thing politically as well. In addition to being the right thing, it's positive politically to go after the people who are targeting Sean Farash, who are targeting Gunther Eagleman tonight, because all of the conservatives and the regular people don't want that sort of behavior to happen. And you send a big signal when you do it, when you go after these perpetrators, which I understand from you, they've never gone after any of the people who've swatted you over all these years.
Nope.
Did you find the culprit in any meaningful way?
So I don't want to give up too much information for security reasons. We believe we know how the swattings took place. We believe we know who was involved. And we've relayed that information to the feds, to local law enforcement. And there's also like the Postal Investigative Service, something like that. I don't know. I guess they have a post office because they were sending stuff in the mail. As far as I know, they did nothing. They never followed up with us one time. They don't care. Now, there was a guy that got arrested and convicted for perpetrating swattings. And I had a journalist reach out to me and say, hey, this was the guy that was swatting you, which is impossible. It's possible the individual was the one who actually picked up the phone and dialed the number. Sure. But if that's the case, it means the only way, let me put it this way, they have not solved the swattings against us. The arrest and conviction of one guy ignores the fact that what he did would have required specific individuals that we believe we know, and we've relayed the information to the feds. What we think was happening was that this guy, what I think, the guy who got arrested and charged, was effectively a swatting hitman, someone you could hire to take out swattings for you. I don't want to give into too many security reasons why, but let me just say, based on the swattings that occurred, I'll put it this way. I'll give a little bit of information. The locations that were swatted is information that is known to no one. Very few people were actually made aware of these locations. We know who these individuals were, and we relayed this information, and nothing is ever done about it. So I don't think they were ever brought to justice.
Yeah, someone's making a decision not to do something about that.
Yep.
These are individuals. It's not some nameless person, and they're all working for the administrative state. So hopefully the guys at the top bring a change to that culture.
Yeah, it was a big story. Someone even super chatted. Mega Bobson says the guy who swatted Jeremy from the quartering just got a heavy prison sentence. The guy was found guilty of multiple swattings nationwide. And people keep saying that's the guy, Tim. And I'm like, how did he get these secure location? How did he get the secure location information?
Right.
Has anyone bothered to ask that? Nope. Because he couldn't. There's no way this random guy on the internet had access to this information.
Yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald was a shooter, but clearly not the only one.
I'll put it this way.
There's always other people involved.
To better explain what I'm saying is the way in which someone would have come to know this location would be to literally spy on our staff and follow them and stalk them. And then after a certain amount of time, discover hidden locations that are, unknown to the public. Why? For security reasons, we have property that is unknown to the public for a variety of reasons, which I'll keep private, but obviously like personal residence and stuff. There's no way anyone's ever going to find my address on the internet. It's impossible. Yet somehow certain locations were made known to this swatter, and we think we have evidence as to how that happened, but the feds just don't care. So I'm not convinced that even if they go after this guy, maybe with Dan, no disrespect to Cash or Pam, but Dan seems like the kind of guy who doesn't mess around. Cash, I think, he's running this thing, and I think he's going to go real high level with it. I kind of feel like, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, that he may be the guy who says, I got so many plates spinning. Do we want Cash to focus on a swatter, or do we want him to go after the lawfare, go after the corrupt officials? I'd say Cash, take go that route, get the job done for the country. Dan Bongino, on the other hand, seems like the kind of guy who's going to make big moves and hard law enforcement on the ground, you know?
Yeah, they also just need to delegate this. You take some staff members and you say, this is your responsibility. Just work on that. It's not that hard. They should do it.
Yeah, man. We have this other story that usually I try to save the more serious stuff for later on in the show, but considering what we're seeing, I want to pull this story up. Just reminding everybody, we'll keep this one. We'll try to be careful with this one because it's very serious. A street preacher had a gun pulled on him by a so-called trans person in San Francisco, so says the tweet. This happened in broad daylight as the Christian proclaimed that God made men to be men and women to be women. So in this video, let's just jump to the end and let's see if they show the individual. I think it's going to freeze on me. So this person, I'm not actually going to show them drawing the weapon. But you can see them reaching into their bag. This person, who is presumed to be a transgender individual, drew a gun and pointed it point blank at a Christian pastor's face in San Francisco. The escalation is getting pretty dang serious.
Totally reasonable behavior.
This is why so in the previous segment, I'm saying rock in a hard place. What I mean by this is the only thing we can do is enforce the law. We cannot tolerate terrorism, and it is. And this is not some 2000s George W. Bush, if you're with us, you're with a terrorist. No, it's none of that. It is quite literally far-left ideologues and extremists whose intention is to instill fear in the public so that they do not engage in certain political behaviors, like speaking in public. So let's play a game. You want to come out and scream Mahmoud Khalil at me because the man was organizing protests and say, free speech, free speech. Okay, here you go. This pastor was engaged in free speech. He wasn't blocking any buildings. He didn't take over any buildings like Mahmoud Khalil did.
The left will not defend your rights at all.
Never. Because all that matters, these are people who will say over and over again, there is no truth but power.
Yep.
They're telling on themselves. They're explaining to you exactly how they see the world. They don't care what's true. They care that they win.
This one hits home for me because I'm not a street preacher from a Christian perspective, but I am kind of a street preacher. I'm out there wearing a sign saying children cannot consent to puberty blockers. I've been assaulted about 40 times. I've had my arm broken. I was attacked just a couple months ago. And that's my worst nightmare because I got kids and a wife to go home to. And these people are getting more violent, it seems, because they're losing. But we can't let them intimidate us. We just got to keep going. But yes, law enforcement needs to start prosecuting these guys.
For everybody who's not seen Billboard Chris's videos, the crazy thing is you're very, what's the right word? Monotone, right? You're standing calm, right? But you know, without trying to being a little crude in how I explain it, you're just standing there. It's kind of boring, right? You're literally standing there and you're holding a camera. Some people will come to you and they'll go, hi. And you're like, here's what I think. And they go, oh, okay. And then you get these leftists who come up to you just burning with fire, angry at you.
Yeah.
Yes. So I don't approach people at all. I have my phone with its great sparkles here because I'm gender nonconforming. Apparently, I have it set up on a tripod, just filming. I don't approach anybody. I just stand there. And normally I'm talking all day long. People come up and they have a conversation, and 95% of the time I'm getting support. But then, of course, you're going to get some radical people. You're going to get some angry people, and you're out on the street. So you get all sorts. You get mental illness and drugs and alcohol and whatever. And yeah, these people lose their minds. I stay calm throughout because I think that's important.
Do you have anyone come out with you? Or is it just you on your own?
Sometimes I do. I don't like a lot of people with me because I'm out there to have conversations. And if there's too many people, it scares people off from approaching. Mm-hmm. But honestly,
you found recourse for the assaults?
So almost all the violence happens in Canada.
Really?
Almost all of it.
So no.
So the answer is basically no. There have been a few arrests. There was a vegan who almost hit me in the head with his wooden sign, and then he kicked my sign up into my face. He got arrested. They've deferred a couple court hearings, but hopefully something happens to him. But when I got my arm broken, for example, that was 6 people jumping me. That was Antifa in Montreal on a Friday night. And there's street footage everywhere. There's cameras everywhere in Montreal. Some of these guys jumped in a car right away and took off. But they could have followed the others who stayed and then just walked away, but they didn't even investigate. Because my message that children are beautiful just as they are, no drugs or scalpels needed, that's the politically unfavorable message.
Bro, just play Christina Aguilera as soon as someone gets mad. You know that song? You are beautiful exactly as you are.
There you go.
Just be like, hey, man, take it from Christina. You are beautiful just the way you are.
Yeah, they say, why do you want to kill kids? Actually, I just don't think we should cut off their body parts and sterilize them.
And they're beautiful just the way they are.
Yeah.
You know, everybody should be body positive, except I guess these people aren't. You know what? I hate to tell you, man, though, I think your country is lost. I think Canada is a failed state.
I'll tell you a big problem with Canada. And I'm not here to rag on Canada because I love Canada.
Oh, I am.
But obviously the U.S. Constitution is superior. You have better freedom of speech. You've got Second Amendment. You've got a better political system. If I wanted to run for politics in Canada, if I wanted to become a member of Parliament, I can't do it because none of the major parties will accept me. The nomination committee has to approve me. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, would have to approve me. He will never do that because apparently I'm too controversial because I speak the truth. If I wanted to become a Republican member of Congress, I could say, I don't like this guy in West Virginia. I'm going to primary him, and then I'm going to become the representative. And we don't have that system in Canada. So the only people who are ever allowed to run for any of the major parties are the ones who play along, who go along, who don't rock the boat. They're never a maverick. They're not a leader. They're only followers. They're lapdogs. And so we have this system perpetuating of weak leaders who don't want to rock the boat and don't want to actually change any of the major problems that are going on in society because they're afraid of the leftist media.
Chris, I have an opportunity for you.
All right.
You see, the leader of this great nation wants your country. You can have our Constitution. It's all yours, buddy.
Hey, man. I would love to have your Constitution. It's not going to happen. Canadians, here's my message to Canadians. They need to stop freaking out. Okay? Trump, with his jokes about the 51st state, yes, he's serious when he says Canadians would be better off with lower taxes. Obviously, Canadians would be better off with a superior military. Yes, that's obviously true. Our fighter jets are from the 1980s. They're the same thing that Tom Cruise was flying around in. And don't get me wrong, those are awesome fighter jets, but they're 40 years old.
Jeez.
You have a better constitution. You have freedom of speech. You don't get arrested for telling the truth. And yes, would we be better off? We would. But unfortunately, Trump derangement syndrome in Canada is at an all-time high. I would say right now at this moment in time, anti-Americanism is probably as high as it's been. And even before Trump got elected, even before all this current brouhaha, if you look at the conservative voters in Canada, half of them would have voted for Kamala Harris.
Good Lord.
How often are Canadians discussing U.S. politics instead of Canadian politics?
Every single day.
I mean, they moved
nonstop.
here. Look at this. Look at this guy right here sitting across from me.
If I'm going to start a business today, if I was a rich guy and I had $10 million, $100 million, and I'm going to start a business, why on earth would I ever start it in Canada?
You were a gay communist?
That's, well, those people are never going to have money.
They're never going to.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
So that's just
well,
a
to be
useless
fair,
hypothetical.
The government gives them money to start a business which likely will not succeed. That happens, right?
Yeah, sure. If I'm in the pocket of some leftists and we want to have some corrupt business going on, sure, maybe then I would do it.
I gotta be honest, man. You know, look, if you remember Spaghetti Gate? This is like 13 years ago. This is
Refresh my memory.
So in Montreal, that's how it's pronounced. It's illegal to speak English completely. I'm kidding. It's illegal to have English supersede French in written in markets and things like that. In public accommodation, I think you describe it.
On signage for businesses,
Right.
you can't have just English signage. It has to be equal, or the French has to be bigger.
French has to be
something like
bigger.
that. Yeah.
And so Spaghetti Gate, I think it was called Spaghetti Gate. The viewers might know. It might have been Pasta Gate or something. I think it was Spaghetti Gate. Basically, they have in Quebec language police. And there was an Italian restaurant, and the language police showed up and said, "Where's the French?" And they were like, "What?" And they were like, "It just says mastacholi, spaghetti, whatever. Where's the French?" And they were like, "But that's just what it's called." So they got a fine for not having French versions of Italian dishes, which don't have French names.
Yeah, I do remember that. So Quebec is an entirely different culture. We almost lost them back in the, early 90s, I guess.
Yeah.
They had a referendum, and they almost left Canada. So there's a party called the Bloc Québécois, which is a federal party. They take seats in our parliament. They normally have maybe 30, 40 seats, something like that. But they only run candidates in Quebec. So I don't know why they're allowed to be a federal party, quite frankly. And they all want to leave Canada. So those are some of the people taking up almost 10% of all the seats in our parliament. It's a bit of a mess.
Really? I think we know the first province to go after.
Well,
I
the
don't-
first province you want to go after as Americans would
Alberta.
definitely be Alberta.
Yeah, that may be.
But it's not gonna
I'm saying, the Alberta, they got oil, right?
A lot of it.
They got a lot of it. And
Right.
so Americans got an interest in securing that. Plus, if we take Alberta, we cut your country in half, destroying your ability to defend yourself. So, divide and conquer. The thing about Quebec is that there's going to be a large, what's the right word? We'll be greeted as liberators because they're going to be like, Trump just says, "Hey, look, here's the plan. We take Canada, Quebec goes independent."
I think you're wrong about the French. The French Canadians, there's a lot of French in them, and I don't imagine them thinking
Wanting their own country?
We don't want them as fellow citizens.
I didn't say that would be the case. I said Trump would go and say, "Help us conquer Canada, and Quebec is a free nation."
Oh, okay. Oh, well, maybe.
So we get everything but Quebec, and Quebec is free. And then you get, 47% of the Quebecois being like, "Ho ho," and they join up. And then what are they going to do in Canada?
Quebec
They
had
can't stop
the
us.
chance to join the U.S. back during the Revolution.
Yep, would have been the 14th colony, but they were French, so they were like, "No." And then we
They weren't a
didn't.
French. They were a British colony, weren't they? Or were they French?
It was a British colony.
They were a British colony.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
Oh, there
spoke
was
French.
French and the British.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was technically a territory of Great Britain. That's why, right?
Let's.
Yeah, Canada started off as a colony, and we gained our independence in 1867.
Wasn't it by writ or something? Like you wrote a letter being like, "Ha," and they were like, "Yeah, okay, I guess."
I don't know how all that worked, but
You don't know your own independence?
I don't know exactly how it all
we
went down.
celebrate it every year
I
with
know.
explosions in the sky.
And I say all the time, there's a different culture between Americans and Canadians. And if you've never been to Canada, you can't really understand it because a lot of people think we're just the same. Canada's way further left. But when people ask me, what is the culture of Canada? I put a lot of thought into this. I can't really tell you today, to be honest. The culture today is multiculturalism because we have so many different cultures from all around the world because our immigration into Canada per capita is much higher than yours has been, even under the Biden administration. And we have many cultures now. So there isn't really a unifying culture, although one of them is almost making fun or poking fun of America. It's almost like a jealousy or an anti-Americanism.
Let's jump to this next story from CNBC. Carrying the conversation. Trump threatens to put 200% tariff on French champagne and other EU spirits. French champagne is redundant as it is only champagne if it is from Champagne. That's
True.
right. Otherwise,
like saying biological male.
Exactly. Sparkling wine. That's what we call it. So it is funny. It's not just champagne. It's wine as well. And that's actually kind of a big deal because people who know wine don't like California wine. They'll try to sell it to you at these upscale restaurants, but everybody knows the good stuff comes from Europe. My attitude is make it better, America. But basically what happens is Trump does this big blanket tariff on aluminum and steel. The EU immediately retaliates on red state stuff like motorcycles and whiskey. Trump then says, okay, then wine. Because the tariffs that are being put in place by Canada and by the EU are targeting specific industries in red areas so that Trump loses or the Republicans lose the midterms. It is in the intention of those tariffs and retaliation are to affect us politically and give these other countries power over us. I reject that. I say carry on, Trump. Do your thing. I'm a fan of the tariffs.
I'm not a fan of the tariffs in principle. If he's looking for a result, that's fine. But they seem to be very haphazard. I'm not sure what we get out of tariffs on champagne. These kind of things seem like they're not really directed. If he's got a goal and there's if it is going to benefit the United States by bringing jobs back or creating an industry or helping to charge an industry that's fallen behind in the U.S., fine. But I'm not just okay with tariffs because Trump's doing it.
Well, that's because they have a tariff on American whiskey. So I understand retaliating in that case. People.
But they want to negatively impact red state business.
Well, some of them, yeah.
And then what's going to happen is you're gonna lose residents, you're gonna lose revenue. There's going to be there's going to be a large portion of rather apolitical people who are going to say, I don't know, I don't care, I just wanted my job, and they're going to vote Democrat. This is going to hinder. Look, Trump was elected with a popular mandate to fix the problems of this country. One of which was how our manufacturing base has been eviscerated. And much of our culture gets eviscerated along with it. When Trump says we want to put a tariff on aluminum and steel, he's not saying screw you, Canada, and screw you, the EU. He's saying, guys, I need to make steel and aluminum competitive in my own country so we can bring this manufacturing back. In response, Canada and the EU are like, if we can't make money off you, you can't make money off us. But their retaliatory tariffs target us politically. The tariffs that Trump put in place didn't have the intention of getting Trudeau removed from power. That was his own fault. Or it's not trying to destabilize the EU politically so that right-wing parties win. That's what they're doing to us. That's messed up.
That tariff makes sense, that one on alcohol, because what's going to happen? France is going to say, okay, we're not going to put tariffs on your whiskey anymore. And then they can all drop the tariffs. Now, with the automotive industry, for example, production of cars in Detroit or wherever in America.
Not anymore.
It's well, there's still an automotive industry going on. There's parts going back and forth. And the production of these automobiles is very integrated between the two countries. So, the critics in Canada will say, what's Trump doing? He's putting tariffs on, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off. This is all calculated. He's producing instability because what does it do? It makes American corporations who hate instability, it makes them more likely to build their product in America. And as we just saw with Mexico, another automotive plant is moving all their production back into the U.S. So there's a purpose to this. Now, I can argue some of these tariff wars going on with Canada, some of it doesn't make sense. What really doesn't make sense is the response by all of Canada's major political leaders, including the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, because they say, we're going to respond with tariffs. What is a tariff? When you slap a tariff on America, what are you doing? You're not penalizing the Americans. You're penalizing Canadians because a tariff on America is a tax on imports paid by Canadians. 17% of our GDP is exports into the U.S. It's a very small percentage of GDP America into Canada. We're not going to win a trade war with them. What they should be saying and what Poilievre should be saying is Trudeau has caused all these problems. Trudeau did nothing about the fentanyl. Trudeau's done nothing about all this fentanyl coming across the border. And Trudeau should be using this to attack his political enemy in Canada instead of doing the exact same thing that Trudeau and all the other political parties are doing, which is starting a war with Trump. Not smart, and it's being evidenced in the polls where Poilievre had a massive lead, an almost unbeatable lead. He was going to have a massive majority. Now he's not even in majority territory.
But if the Conservatives win in Canada, is that really going to fix things, or is it just a Band-Aid on a bullet wound?
So I say they're liberal light. They're certainly a lot better than the Liberals. It's hard to be that bad because the Liberals are pretty much straight up communists.
What is their platform exactly?
So the Conservative platform?
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. Pierre has been running on a campaign of, we need to have a carbon tax election. So the Liberals introduced a carbon tax, a consumer carbon tax that we pay on our gasoline and other forms of energy, and it keeps going up every year. And so is that an issue? Absolutely, it's an issue. They should be addressing it. I think it's a little bit down the pecking order. The Liberals wanted to introduce a bill that would make it hate speech to comment on certain things that could potentially see you go to prison for life. They want to reduce our freedom of speech. They want to trans kids. They want to harm children. They want to introduce all these radical leftist policies that the Conservatives privately are against, but never speak up about publicly. So Pierre would be better for our freedom of speech because he's not going to introduce these hate speech laws. What else would he be better at? Honestly, I have to think about it because they run on so many of the same issues. I think he would be a little bit better economically, but it's only a little bit better.
So why vote for them? Why vote for them?
Personally, I would vote for them because freedom of speech is such an important issue, and that's coming under attack in many Western nations, including Canada. And I think they will be personally better on gender ideology. Having said that, they voted for a bill called Bill C-4, which made it a crime for parents to protect their kids from this cult. If you convince your little girl she's a boy, that's totally fine. But if your girl comes home from school or she's been indoctrinated online and she thinks she's a boy, and you say, no, sweetheart, that's not right, you're a girl, and you try to help her feel comfortable as a girl, that's now technically a crime of conversion therapy, and parents can go to jail for up to 5 years. And the Conservatives fast-tracked that bill and passed it unanimously.
The Conservatives.
So there was a bill before called C6. Some of the Conservatives voted against it, some voted for it. Then an election was called, the bill came back as C4, and they didn't want to deal with the leftist media calling them bigots. So the Conservatives fast-tracked it and passed it unanimously.
Wow. There are some states that basically have this law as well. There was a story that when I don't want to say viral necessarily, but was shared around the detransitioner community, where this guy told a story online in a forum. He got called into a school, and the school told him that he had a son, not a daughter, and that his daughter, now his son, had gender dysphoria, and they were going to start social transition, and they wanted to start a regiment for gender transition. And so the dad thanked the school and said, what do I do? Just tell me what to do. Thank you so much for saving my child. And they said, wonderful. We're so glad you agree. They said, you're going to go to the doctor. Here's how you do it. He said, wonderful. Immediately went home, packed up everything, got his kid, moved away from that place, and said, we really appreciate everything you did for us. Our family's moving because I got a new job, but we'll make sure we get my son the care he needs. As soon as he moved out to the rural area, he said, totally removed his daughter from all of the media that she'd been using, and within 3 months, she was back to being a normal teenage girl.
Yeah, I have friends who moved from Washington State to Florida to protect their daughter because they have that bill there. Just today, actually, it was announced that the Supreme Court is going to take up a case in Colorado regarding their conversion therapy bill. So to be clear, these conversion therapy bills make it a crime to try to change someone's sexual orientation. And most people agree we shouldn't be doing that. And guess what? It's a virtual non-existent practice. This isn't happening. But the real reason for these bills is this second component that they sneak in there. And it's about trying to convert someone's gender identity.
But what's wrong with conversion therapy?
Yeah, I was just about to say,
well,
if it's an adult that's seeking out therapy because they have whatever religious or moral qualms with same-sex activity and they don't want to engage in that and want to seek out the root cause of it in themselves, why should they be restricted from doing that by the state?
27 states have banned conversion therapy.
That's insane.
Yes, so people with same-sex attraction, if they want to talk to somebody about that, they should be allowed to have that conversation. But therapists in all these states won't even talk to them.
And that's also something that can be weaponized against religious therapists. I know like a lot of Catholics seek out specifically Catholic therapists. A Catholic therapist who agrees with church teaching on these things is not going to encourage you to go down the route of gender transition, obviously.
Right.
But they are now in danger of being targeted by this bill.
Right. So the Supreme Court's going to take up this Colorado bill, but strategically, conservatives need to get the message that the way they should be talking about these conversion therapy bills is they should be addressing the gender identity component. Because that's the real reason these bills are written. It's also, politically speaking, a much bigger win. The same-sex, homosexual conversion therapy is a non-issue. This isn't a big deal. But what's happening is in all these blue states that have passed these laws, therapists won't even talk to these kids who are struggling with gender identity issues. And I say gender identity with quotes because there's no such thing as a gender identity. We have personalities. That's all it is. And personalities don't require a sex change. If a boy is more effeminate, if a girl is more masculine, a masculine girl is called a tomboy. That doesn't mean she's a boy. She doesn't have a male gender identity. This whole thing is cult speak. And she's just a beautiful girl. That's what she is.
And a effeminate boy is called a sissy.
If you want to go there.
I mean, I'm not trying to be crass. That's literally what the other boys would call a small, effeminate male.
Well, you know, if we want to get into this, if we look back in history before they started giving kids these drugs and surgeries to change their sex, to do child transition, gender dysphoria, this discomfort with your sex, affected mostly boys. It was maybe 1 out of 30,000. It started at a very young age. And we look at all the academic studies that were done where they followed these kids from the age of 3, 4, 5 up into their 20s. The biggest study that was done, 87.8% of these boys, when they went through puberty, their gender dysphoria desisted. It went away. And 63.6% grew up to be gay.
Yep.
So now they're telling these same kids who would grow up to be gay that they were born in the wrong body, that they're supposed to be a girl. They give them puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, which is the onset of puberty. So their genitals aren't going to grow. Girls' breasts aren't going to grow. Their hips don't get wider. It's causing bone demineralization, a whole host of problems. Cancers even, anecdotally. We don't know all the long-term impacts because there's never been a clinical study and you can't even do an ethical one. But we're telling these same kids now that would grow up to be gay that they were born wrong.
So have you talked to detransitioners, and have you noticed as well that most of these detransitioners are female? And I wonder what's your take on why that may be.
Yes, so this is a social...
I've noticed like almost all of the outspoken detransitioners are female.
Yeah, that's right. There's a young man called Abel Garcia who speaks out about this a lot. He was just in DC for Detransition Day yesterday, actually. But this is a social contagion affecting girls. Abigail Schreier's book is called The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters for a reason. It's impacting girls. And almost all these kids are on the autism spectrum, or they've had sexual abuse or trauma, or there's some mental health comorbidity going on. We know from the Gender Identity Development Service in the UK that 70% of the kids there had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities. But now we treat gender as though it's the source of all of it, and we ignore all these other mental health problems.
Well, one of the biggest issues with it is in places like New York, and this is most liberal jurisdictions, gender identity is defined as, quite literally, self-expression. So if you look at, have you ever taken a dive into New York's human rights law? It actually, the New York City Charter actually defines, or the city code defines what gender identity is, and it says your self-expression. The way you dress, the name you call yourself, the pronouns you choose to use, and it is legal to call yourself anything. And no public accommodation can reject you because of it.
Right. Let's look at what's going on here, though. So the left for years told us that we shouldn't put kids in some stereotypical box. There's no right or wrong way to be a girl or boy. I say this all the time, and the most rabid leftist trans activists can't disagree with me. But then in their next breath, they say, oh, this girl isn't conforming to stereotypes, so therefore she must be a boy, and we'd better cut off her breasts.
That's all motivated reasoning, though. Like they want people to be like them, the activists I'm talking about. They want to see more people that are trans. They want to see people that are, involved in the LGBTQ ideology or whatever. I'm not sure exactly why it is that they feel the need to, but it's all motivated reasoning.
100% right. So this brings me to a very important point. I'm actually suing the Australian government right now on a freedom of speech issue. Last year, about a year ago, there's a woman named Teddy Cook in Australia. She runs their LGBTQ organization. She's an activist. She's a woman who says she's a man. She's cut off her breasts. She's all tatted up. She's all hairy. And she posts pictures of bestiality on her social media. She says trans-identified people have better sex when they're high on illicit drugs. She posts about trans orgies. All this crazy stuff. Naturally, the World Health Organization put her on a panel of 20 experts to write healthcare policy for trans-identified kids and adults. I wrote a post saying this woman, yes, she's a female, because people get confused when they see the beard and everything. She's been appointed to this panel at the WHO, and I wrote, people who belong in psychiatric wards are writing policy for people who belong in psychiatric wards. I will confess this is not my nicest tweet in the history of the world. Technically accurate. I'm not saying all people who identify as trans belong in a psychiatric ward. The most extreme ones, absolutely. And this is one of those people. So to your point, they are trying to recruit people for their own ideology. They don't want them to be their true selves. Yeah. They just want them to be trans. And all across the world, the people who feel this way are the ones writing healthcare policy.
I do. We have a lot more to talk about on this. Obviously, it's a big area of your expertise, but I think we should save a bit more for the uncensored portion of the show, as we can get a little bit more into a lot of the people behind this stuff. So for now, let's jump to this next story. And then for those, if they're watching, smash the like button, share the show, and make sure you're a member at Rumble Premium. Use promo code Tim10, because at 10, we'll go into the uncensored portion where I have some more questions for Billboard Chris. For now, let's talk about Canada, where I can insult your country. Trump says he loves Canada, but it should not exist. Trump's insistence that Canada is not a real country bears a striking resemblance to Putin in the run-up to his invasion of Ukraine. I kid you not, the quote-unquote liberal media is arguing that Trump is acting like Putin with Canada, look at this one. Look at this. Trump isn't joking about wanting to annex Canada. Al Jazeera, closest target. Why is Trump so focused on Canada? CNN, Canadians are taking Trump's annexation talk very seriously. New poll, just 8% of Americans want to annex Canada. So Trump was asked about the tariffs, and he actually said something to the effect of, at some point, it shouldn't be a country. At some point, someone drew an imaginary line and separated us, but it would be great as the 51st state, which in all seriousness makes literally no sense, because there's how many provinces do you have? 10 or something? 11?
10 provinces, 3 territories, 40 million people.
Yeah, that's not one state. That's 10 states. And then, so I think the appropriate thing to do is to invade, be greeted as liberals. I'm kidding, by the way. But Trudeau has responded saying, or Trudeau has made the statement, he believes that Trump's tariff plan is to destroy the economy of Canada so that it will be easier to annex.
Come on. Come on.
Don't you want to be an American? Come on.
Okay, let's give a real life example here. So these tariffs were announced. Canada responded with retaliatory tariffs, 25% across the board. A plumber wrote, and I retweeted this the other day, great. Now, every single thing we bring into Canada, we're going to be paying 25% more on. Because when they slap tariffs on America, they're taxing themselves, right? It's to reduce supply coming in from America. But
Americans won't pay more.
American Standard, Toto, all these plumbing fixtures, they all come from America. So now if you're building a house, you're going to be paying 25% more as a Canadian on your bathtubs and your sinks and your faucets and everything. You're going to be spending thousands of dollars more. Why? Not because of Trump, because of the Canadian response to Trump. The last thing we should be doing is putting on retaliatory tariffs. We should be acting like statesmen and working with Trump. If he's unhappy with our trade agreement, then we can look at tweaking it. It was negotiated about 7 years ago. We can tweak it a little bit. But all they're doing with this trade war is hurting Canadians far more than Americans.
So I can't speak to Canada as a nation. I can speak to the United States. We have the means to produce anything we need. We have beautiful Alaska, which we should invade and occupy. For some reason, it's empty. And many, not everybody, but a lot of people in Alaska would love it if the government actually said, hey, how about we expand industry and development in Alaska, which people need to understand. Everybody just assumes that Canada is ice cold and like everybody's living in the snow. But the further north you go, the longer growing season you have. You have really long, you have summers with really long days. And so actually in Alaska, I think it's where they grew like the world record watermelon or some ridiculous thing. Because in the summer, it's nuts. We have an opportunity here in the United States. I can't speak for your fixtures or whatever, but I can tell you is tariffs will not, in the broad sense, make things more expensive for the people of this country. The reason I can't speak to Canada because I don't know what capability you guys have of making plumbing fixtures. In the United States, I know we can. So, for instance, auto manufacturing. The real simple version is if we are competing against countries with no environmental regulations and with no labor standards, they will be able to produce cars cheaper. Sure, fine. When you put a tariff on those products, in the extreme short term, if there is no available products in the country, yes, the price is going to go up because the company that is producing those and exporting them into your country has a monopoly. To be completely honest, anybody has a monopoly, they can charge you whatever they want. But if there's any competition, so let's say there are cars made in the United States and cars made in Mexico. The cars made in Mexico, let's say they're $20,000, probably low for a car these days. And their profit margin, let's say they make $5,000 per car. I don't know, it's probably a ridiculous number. It's a huge margin, 25%. In America, they're selling for $22,000 and struggling to compete with Mexico. Trump says, okay, we're doing a 25%. Well, we're going to do a 20% tariff. The car from Mexico now costs $24,000 for the company that's trying to import it into the country to sell. They say, we can't. No one will buy from us because the American-made car is 22. So what did the importers do? They eat the loss. If they had a 25% margin, they absorb that in their cost to stay competitive with American-made products, with home country products. The problem only arises if there is a monopoly or if your country is incapable of supplying these products to themselves, in which case the tariffs never mattered. If Canada can't make plumbing fixtures, then every company in the United States could just be like, hey, guys, it's not illegal for us to price fix Canadian goods. The Canadian government can't do anything about it. Let's increase the cost of all of our plumbing fixtures by 10% because they're dependent upon us and they can't make their own products. The tariff doesn't change that. So I am for the tariffs. We work in the skateboard industry. We work in coffee. I can tell you the tariffs have only benefited us. I love it.
Yeah, but the only tariffs hurting Canadians are the ones that the Canadian politicians are putting in place. This is my whole point. If you want, so when Trump is putting on tariffs, all that does to Canada is it hurts our exports. And yes, that's a big deal. It's also hurting American companies and people as well. And this is why we have trade agreements. And the last thing we should be doing is all freaking out and saying that Trump is going to annex the country.
I don't know.
We should just be negotiating trade agreements that are beneficial to each country.
Look, Canada's cool and all,
it's not that hard.
I don't think they are. I think America's too big, and it's a big country. Some say it's the biggest and the best. It's certainly not the biggest. Russia is, but the United States can and should be producing everything on its own before it is giving away our refining, our manufacturing, our mining, whatever it may be, to literally any other country.
Every country should negotiate trade agreements that benefit their country the most.
Yeah.
That's the point of having a nation, is when you're the prime minister or president of a country, your job is to do the best thing for your people.
And the issue I see is that the past 30 years, the United States government has negotiated very, very bad deals that have hurt the American worker and destroyed our manufacturing base and the working class in this country, notably with all of the jobs moving to China or Mexico. Now Trump says, let's renegotiate. And what happens? Look, we were given a premium deal to all of these countries, to Canada, maybe not as much as China, to be honest, or Europe. I think China was the biggest recipient of all of this stuff. And then we have clothing made in Bangladesh and Indonesia. Trump says, we as a nation will not survive unless we have a strong economy, which means we need to be competitive. The problem? You've got lower standards in China, no standards in China, smog, you can't even see. And in Mexico, way lower standards and way lower costs. An American company cannot compete with slave labor and no environmental regulations.
Right. And Canada is not as big of a threat to the U.S., obviously, as countries like China, because we don't have cheap labor like they do in China or Taiwan or Pakistan or Vietnam or wherever. And if you look back in history, it was a huge mistake to have as much free trade as we have had with those nations, because now, like an addict, we're dependent on them. We're dependent on them for cheap goods, and we're also dependent on them for immigration. Because if we stopped immigration, our economy would crater.
I think this was widely discussed in the 2000s. There were a lot of prominent individuals who wanted to, quote unquote, normalize the North American economic bloc, is how it was described. So Canada's economy, what in the 90s, what was it like? $3 Canadian was $1 US or something like that?
No, our dollar, honestly, right now is about as low as it ever gets. Right now,
150?
one US dollar buys you about 150. We hover between that, and usually we're around 130. For a brief time, about 10 or 15 years ago, our dollar actually surpassed yours, but then it went right back.
Wow.
But it's usually around 130.
Okay, yeah, it looks like it. So I was wrong about that. It's usually around that mark. I remember when I went and visited Canada, a lot of people told me that they prefer it when the U.S. dollar is stronger than the Canadian, because Americans come and throw money around because they get more service for it, and the people in Canada make more money off of tourists and the service sector and things like this. So there was a discussion among prominent global leaders about normalization of the North American economy, and that is, with the NAFTA free trade agreement, you would have the Mexican economy going up, you'd have the Canadian economy going up, and the U.S. economy would go down. But the U.S. economy going down didn't matter that much. Now, publicly, they were like, no, it's going to be good for everybody, because what happens is Americans will be free to do higher skill labor and make more money. So if we have Mexico doing certain jobs and Canada doing certain jobs, Americans can take the higher level positions. That's literally not what happened. Said the same thing about China. If we give the labor to China, then we don't have to do the labor anymore, right? Makes sense. And then what happened? You basically deal with, what do they call it? When in the ocean floor, when the floor gets swept by a chemical, it kills all of the lowest life forms, and then it creates a rush all the way shooting up to the top where everything dies, because everything relies on the bottom.
Right.
This country can't exist without a working class base, and we've gotten rid of it. So now Trump says, we got to bring it back. That's going to be painful for Canada and Mexico.
Yes, so doing what I do, I travel all around the world having conversations outside. And I've been to about 20 different U.S. states. And I go to some of these cities, and the buildings are all 40, 50 years old. And it's a tragedy. And people are moving out, and there's empty buildings. And it is because of international trade. And Trump is right when he says that the U.S. has been getting taken advantage of. But this was done short-sightedly because they were able to bring in cheap product and take advantage of cheap labor and child labor overseas. So I understand what he's doing, for sure. And Canadians just need to stop freaking out, because Canada as a country is not going to stop ceasing to exist, and all this drama is going to go away, and we're still going to have a trade agreement. But my gosh, what Canadians really need to focus on is the political people. We're going to have an election soon. We cannot elect another liberal government.
What do you think the best means to get the Canadian people to focus on that are? Because I personally, I agree your government is far too left, and for my liking, I don't like the idea of being sandwiched between two such incredibly leftist countries with Canada and Mexico. So is there anything that you think that the Canadian people or that Canadian influencers or whatever can do to kind of knock the Canadian people into realizing that these are bad policies? Because the policies aren't going to change with the new guy.
So the difference with Canada is we don't have real conservative media. There are a few small companies. Rebel News does a great job. There are a few other smaller ones. We don't have the conservative radio network like you have in the U.S. I mean, you have tens of millions of people listening to conservative people on the radio. You've got all these huge podcasters like this guy, Tim Pool. We don't have any of that in Canada. We don't have these big influencers. I hate that term.
I'd be in jail if I was in Canada.
No, you'd be fine.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
I don't think so.
I say whatever I want in defiance of what the government wants, wherever I want. Nothing happens to me. What would happen is if you were employed, you'd be fired. For sure.
If I was in the UK, I'd be in jail.
Yeah, probably. Me too.
Yeah. Carl Benjamin was talking about that on the Lotus Eaters, that they're not allowed to say certain things due to the whatever Telecommunications Act or something in the UK. So like the politics is confined to acceptable means or something.
They're arresting people for praying.
Oh, I know. In the UK, there was a woman who was standing outside of an abortion clinic and said nothing and then closed her eyes. So they arrested her.
Yeah.
And they were like, you were praying in your head, weren't you? And she was like, no. And they're like, you're under arrest.
Yeah. And last year, there was a man, so he actually lost his child at this abortion clinic. And he's a Christian man. He wanted to pray. He didn't stand in front of the abortion clinic, but they have these buffer zones, they're called, around abortion clinics. You can't do anything. So he was standing about 200 feet away on a park across the street, standing by a tree, not impacting anybody, praying silently in his head, and they arrested him.
That's crazy. praying silently in your head. Literal thought crime.
Literal thought crime, 200 feet away
I think
from an abortion
In the
clinic.
UK, yeah.
I got to pause. I think as much as we have our disagreements, Canada, we have to unite and invade the UK. We will liberate Carl Benjamin. Carl, we will save
We're
you.
going to come save you, Carl.
I want to abolish
Actually,
this
Carl,
parliamentary system all across the Commonwealth.
I don't know how people in the UK can still actually call themselves a free country knowing that that happens. You literally get picked up and thrown in jail for thinking.
Let's not bring up Tommy Robinson and the stories he's pursued and what they've done to him. The UK is a horrifying nightmare dystopia. I got to be honest. If like 20 years ago, you were like, hey, look, man, V for Vendetta, that's a great idea and all for what you think the dystopia is going to look like. But I got a better idea. Roving bands of child rapists will run free while the government lets them go. And anyone who dares speak up will be locked up in solitary. People would be like, that's not realistic. Nobody would tolerate that. The view from most people was that in V for Vendetta, there's a disaster. The government says, we'll save you. Everyone says thank you. And then the government locks everyone down. You take a look at what's going on in the UK right now with arresting people over naughty words and letting other people get away with the most heinous of deeds. People couldn't fathom that the totalitarian government would act that way. They'd be like, no, they'd arrest everybody. Narco-tyranny.
They're literally letting pedophiles out of prison to make room for people who wrote mean things on social media.
Indeed. What a nightmarish place to live. And you know what? You know what the worst thing about the UK is? When you go to those little convenience stores and they have the cheese and onion sandwiches. Have you ever seen those?
What?
Yeah, it's like
What?
It's like minced onion with cheese whiz on bread, and it's ready to go, and it's delicious. But oh heavens me, it's terrifying.
That was a wartime delicacy.
It probably was.
Australia is just as bad
Oh, they have Vegemite.
for freedom of speech. Oh, well,
Oh yeah.
that's bad too. I had that once. I didn't like it. But for freedom of speech, they're terrible.
Did you guys see that Trump? I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but he called Tesla Tesla.
Did he?
Yeah, it was the greatest thing ever. Because for those who don't know, the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth accent, except for Canadians, is to end your. And they don't know this. They always tell me I'm wrong, but they don't say they say So they said they used to call Obama Obamer. They don't say Obama. They say Obamer. And I'm like, that's his right name. That's correct. Please. Anyway, let's jump to this next story, ladies and gentlemen. We got a hot one. It is hot drama tonight. Jordan Peterson has declared war on Candace Owens, and this is getting wild. So he's gone after Candace, calling her a hypocrite and a Pharisee. And what else did he call her? A scribe? He called her a lot of things. Candace had responded to Andrew Klavan. This, I believe, largely is bubbling up from Candace Owens having left the Daily Wire. There's been some tension and animosity. Candace Owens, of course, has been accused of being anti-Semitic quite a bit, and actually won from some organization. Not that I think these organizations matter, because but she won Anti-Semite of the Year, and I'm like, I could make up an organization, put a website up, and then give anybody an award I want. It's meaningless. But where this goes wild and where it begins, all has to do with. You got a post from Andrew Klavan of the Daily Wire talking about the phrase Christ is King. Candace Owens responds. Jordan Peterson responds in a long thread calling Candace choice words. The root of this debate, fiasco, whatever, is the phrase Christ is King. The argument from many people and from this group called this is awful. I'm sorry. The Network Contagion Research Institute. I facepalm when I see this. I'm sorry, guys.
Network Contagion Institute.
Thy name in vain. How online extremists hijacked Christ is King. Okay, so the argument they're making is that they're anti-Semites who don't engage in debate. They simply respond to people saying Christ is King. And then what this document, I guess. I thought, it's right here. Here we go. Yeah, we can look at it. I don't know. I can make it bigger, right? There we go. 21 pages, and it basically goes into how these extremists online are hijacking religious affirmation. The phrase Christ is King has been systematically co-opted by extremist figures, for which they mention a handful of people you know and love. The first thing they mention is the usage of Christ is King as a phrase, and they're claiming that the expanded use of it is meant as, and I'll paraphrase, the criticism of the phrase, of the use of Christ is King, not the phrase itself, is that it's being used by anti-Semites to insult Jews. Basically, whenever someone is, perceived as quote unquote Jew by the Jewanon people or whatever, or someone is in any way defensive of something that people determine to be like Israeli or whatever, you'll get a response from someone saying, Christ is king. To which many people have come on and said, aha, you don't really mean it. You're using that to attack people you perceive as pro-Israel, pro-Jewish, whatever it may be. So then this is the heat of the debate. They mentioned Jack Posobiec in 21 saying Christ is king twice. And they mentioned that it is a what do they say? Where is it? By the context, it shifted. Where is the mention? They say, here we go. Jack Posobiec had one of the most, he authored the phrase, amassing a combined 34,000 likes. Posobiec, while known as sometimes polarizing in American discourse, nevertheless used the phrase in its original apolitical context. His posts, while reflective of his broader conservative views, were semantically neutral and devoid of bigotry. They likely represented a historic, normative use of the Christian phrase. Well, there you go, Jack. They're saying, yeah, I guess. However, they then get very mad at Candace Owens and Jake Shields. And they mention these two posts, which I don't quite get why they're highlighting. Candace Owens tweeted, Bridget Macron was born Jean-Michel Trogneau. He lived as a man for about 30 years before transitioning to Bridget. While he lived as a man, he fathered 3 children. He statutorily raped his young student and the future president of France, Emmanuel Macron, hashtag Christ is king. I don't know what that hashtag has to do with what she posted. But okay. Anyway, I digress. The first thing I want to say before we get into the big drama of this, anytime a consortium or institute puts out a report on wrongthink, you've just lost the argument. And I'm just like, they just crumple it up and throw it in the garbage. I don't understand the point of this. So here's where we're at. Andrew Klavan says, the problem with arguing with anti-Semites is that they are genuinely as stupid as bricks. They say Christ is king and America first, then make excuses for Iran's government of radical Islamists dedicated to U.S. destruction. They think Gentiles have tormented and persecuted Jews in one nation after another, so there must be something wrong with Jews. Really, Sherlock? They're not even smart enough to be feckless clowns. Jews are less than 3% of their population and have made amazing contributions to science, industry, finance, and entertainment. And that's not even mentioning the bagels. Oh, the bagels. And while Jews have their evildoers like everybody else, the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Nagasaki and Bolsheviks and Leo Frank are truly the work of semi-literate morons. I know they like to flood social media with ugly garbage. It's all they've got. But paying attention to them lowers your IQ more than fluoride and doesn't even help your teeth. Best to leave them to play with themselves. Candace Owens responded, thank you for re-upping the most crucial conversation about Christ is king almost exactly a year later and once again during the season of Lent. After a year of thoughtfulness, I want you to know that I will never stop declaring it. And then Jordan Peterson says, this is where it gets heavy. Candace Owens is a true pharisaical pretender. She vociferously proclaims her devotion to Christ for no other reason than to elevate her perceived status. Her outrage is designed not to shout the truth from rooftops, but build bridges or make peace, but to subvert Christianity itself with its new force to her own purpose. She is literally using God's name in vain. There are few more unforgivable sins. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which appear beautiful on the outside, but inside are full of dead men's bones and every kind of filth. Holy crap. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. You shut the door on the of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. All this for the Machiavellians who dare to use what is good for their own vile purposes. And then, finally, he says if she wasn't the worst of hypocrites, she would forswear the Tate brothers. But they draw attention, and for a pretender, all attention is good attention, even at the cost, say, of the pearl of great price. Candace responded saying, judging by the comments, this tweet appears to be backfiring. In your highly sought-after psychological assessment, why do you suppose that is, Doc? I gotta be honest. Candace Owens' response is much better suited for the internet in addressing the perceptions of the individuals. And I think Jordan Peterson and Andrew Klavan are making mistakes. Not to mention, if you really want to address any kind of perceived misuse of Christ as king, drafting a consortium report is the worst way to go about doing it. But more to the point, I wonder if this is just underlying a greater conflict having to do with the Daily Wire and lost talent. I don't know what you guys think.
I think that the beef between Peterson and Candace Owens. I mean, look, Peterson's very fond of religion, but he's not a religious guy himself, so I'm not 100% sure.
Isn't he a Christian?
No.
He's not a Christian.
No.
What? I thought
His
he was.
wife's
He
a
does not
Catholic.
profess to be a Christian and does not profess to believe in the resurrection.
Yeah,
Wow.
So I don't really understand what convicts him particularly about the use of Christ's name if he doesn't believe in Christ's divinity.
Is Clavin a Christian?
Clavin is.
Yes, he
Yeah.
is.
Is he Catholic?
No, he's Protestant.
Really? And Michael Knowles and Matt Walsh tolerate that? I'm kidding.
Yeah.
ChatGPT says Jordan Peterson's a Christian. I thought he was.
No.
Yeah, I don't think he is. His wife, I believe, is Catholic.
Well, I'm curious your thoughts, Mary, as a Christian.
It's just so stupid to me that this debate is resurrected, I guess, by this report, because it's been over a year since she left Daily Wire. So can everyone just associate how they want to associate and move on with their lives? But also, proclamation of Christ's kingship and evangelism for Christ's kingdom is obviously a core tenet, if not the core tenet, of Christianity. So tone policing the way that the phrase Christ is king is used is always going to be kind of pointless, because that means you're trying to read the intentions and the hearts of people using that phrase, which is nearly impossible. So the whole debate just seems really
Are you
stupid
Christian
and
as well?
pointless to me.
Billboard Chris.
I don't really know how to answer that, Tim, but that's a longer conversation for another time. I'm kind of there.
Oh, okay.
I actually have a story from today, but we're not going to get into that. But I would say I am, but I've got some issues, as many people do. But I would offer a slightly alternative viewpoint there. I think people are using Christ is king as a means of trolling. They absolutely are. And that is coming from a lot of the anti-Semitic people. This is indisputable.
But is Candace doing that? I don't think Candace is doing that.
I think she is.
You do? Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, when she tweeted Bridget Macron as a man in this very hilarious tweet and then hashtagged Christ is king, it seems kind of like a non sequitur. But I understand what you're saying, because I've seen people respond to posts by saying Christ is king that seem out of context and may be antagonistic.
I mean, the entire Nick Fuentes crowd, all the groypers, all the frogmen on Twitter, they all say that constantly. And they're just trolls, and they're jerks, and they're liars. No, that's not Candace. I'm just talking about the bigger picture.
No, I know. I mean, they highlight Candace and Jake Shields as like the principal like doers of using it as a troll to antagonize. I don't think Candace is doing that.
I think maybe with her addition of the hashtag Christ is king at the end of that tweet about Brigitte Macron, I like started off watching her series about it. I honestly don't. I've been listening to it, but I haven't understood a single thing. But she's talking about a lot of the shady associations that the Macrons have, and also their endorsement and creation of the Olympics show that mocked the Last Supper. I think maybe it seems out of context to people who haven't looked at her series, but to her, because she's deeply investigated all of that, it seems to contextually make sense to add that in the tweet, because she's talking about this anti-Christian
I see.
Olympics show that they put on last year.
So would it be fair then to say this report is misattributing the intention of her tweet and its relation to her larger body of work?
That's why the debate seems stupid to me, because you're just going to assert that you know what someone is thinking and feeling in the moment, and you can't.
And you're mad they said it to you.
Basically.
I do think people troll with it. I think they are Christian, they're doing it. But I think the perception is exaggerated among those who are offended by it. Like the people who are, maybe the right word isn't trolling. They're basically shutting down the conversation with it, is maybe another way to say it.
I don't know if I get a disproportionate amount of these people in my replies, but I get thousands of them all the time, particularly because of the issue I talk about. All the Nick Fuentes crowd, all these groypers, all these anti-Semites, they all want to blame the Jews for transgenderism. Because
everything
they blame
the Jews for everything, but because of this doctor in the pre-Nazi era who ran the sexual clinic there, Magnus Hirschfeld, he was a Jewish man. And Candace had a podcast one day where she said, you know, we learned that the Nazis burned all these books and burning these books was bad. And she says, but you know what? They never told us what books they were burning. And then she goes on to mention these books from Magnus Hirschfield's clinic. She doesn't mention any of the other books, just those ones. As a justification, really, is what she was doing for why they were burning the books. And what all these anti-Semites will say is that, Chris, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews behind everything. Magnus Hirschfield, why don't you know this? Well, I talk about it all the time. And you know what? The Jewish people are not a monolith. There are going to be bad Jews in the world, just as there are bad people from any identity group or culture or whatever. What they never mention is that the first actual vaginoplasty surgery that was done and the attempt to put a uterus into a man, a surgeon doing that was the surgeon for the Luftwaffe who worked at the Dachau concentration camp who conducted freezing experiments.
So the Nazis started it.
Well, there was a Nazi working with a Jew on the very first surgery. Erwin Gorbrandt.
Together.
Erwin Gorbrandt was his name, but they never mentioned that. But they just want to blame it all on Jews, and it's not that simple. A lot of the people I know
You say checkmate.
who are most supportive in this fight against transgenderism are Jewish, but they just want to blame Jews for everything, and I think she's feeding into that.
I think the whole I think the quote unquote Jewanon they call it, because there's this like I think it's largely bots. I don't think it's all bots. I think it's this along with any conversation. You've got to be careful because people think you're insulting them. If you're critical of Israel, I'm not talking about you. I say Israel derangement syndrome for some of these people, and then people who are genuinely critical of Israel are like, how dare you claim that I'm deranged? I'm like, I didn't say you, dude. Like Dave Smith, I'm a big fan. He is not deranged. He is critical of Israel. He is critical of the formation of the state and the funding of it. And he is sound, rational, and he's a funny guy. And I respect him. But then there's some people who are just like, literally anything happens in the world and it was Israel. And I'm like, my guy, like we had someone call in talking about the fentanyl crisis. One of our members called into the Uncensored show. And the guest we had on blamed the fentanyl crisis in West Virginia on Jews. And I was like, my guy, I'm going to stop you there. Okay. This is not what people in this state think and are concerned about. There's an opioid crisis affecting West Virginian working class people, and literally telling them it originates from Israel and Israel security companies and Jews is not solving their problem nor explaining anything rational to them. That's Israel derangement syndrome.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about this uptick in anti-Semitism in the world for sure. In Vancouver, where I'm from, it was actually Muslims who came out to a softball game with swastikas and they were harassing children. Like, this is not okay. And this stuff, there's a huge uptick all across the world. I've had thousands of people tell me in my replies that, Chris, it's the Jews that make puberty blockers. So then I point out AbbVie Pharmaceuticals, for example, all of their manufacturing locations, none of which are in Israel. And they're the maker of Lupron, which is probably the most commonly used drugs. And by the way, these drugs were never designed to block puberty. They were designed for prostate cancer or endometriosis or uterine fibroids. They're being used off-label. But they just want to blame Jews on everything. And there is a contagion to this, whereas some people are getting radicalized.
I don't think it's real. I do think some people are being radicalized, but I think it's fake. So I'll give you just the hard example. I was talking to someone. Actually, I think we had Myron on the show. I think we talked about this on the show. Myron Gaines was saying that he thought that criticism of Israel was becoming mainstream and prominent. And I said that's absolutely not true. People in the United States overwhelmingly support Israel, and there's one really obvious reason. They're Christians. They're evangelical. Christians want some semblance of control in the region for obvious religious reasons. Whatever. They're not going to back down from having whatever control they have. So, and he agreed with me. But he said, at least on Twitter, it's becoming prominent. It's not. So I go on Twitter, and I can post, with no text, just a poll, Israel-Palestine. During this big conflict, it's a better poll when we're literally dealing with, the deep trenches of the hostage crisis and the war and the bombing. It's less in the news cycle now, admittedly. But I will get 70 to 80,000 responses, and it'll be 80, 20, 70, 30 in support of Israel. A lot of these people, what happens is, like you mentioned with the transgender issue, I believe you are largely being botted. It's probably one person running 50 accounts. Their intention is to destroy your work by making you follow something incorrectly. So this is what happens to a lot of people. And if you're weak-willed, what happens is you're Billboard Chris. You go on X, you say puberty blockers are bad. You get a response. Don't you know that this started with insert Jew? Weak-willed people see that and they see a bunch of responses and they say, wow, what's this? They look, they find out there's this guy. They post about it. They get a ton of retweets, a ton of likes, a ton of views. They go, whoa, look how much traction I'm getting. They chase after it. They then build a world around this reaction and believe it's true and believe it's mainstream and prominent when it's not. So I explained to them, listen, if 50 people respond to your X post telling you something about the Jews, and then I can get 80,000 people supporting Israel, you can argue it's just my audience. Fair point. But I get those same responses about the Jews that anybody else gets. I just ignore them because I think they're bots. And then what happens? When I post, the last time I did it was when Myron was here, and all of the replies were frog avatars saying Jews, 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 whatever. Almost all of them. 80,000 of the votes supported Israel, though. They started quote tweeting the poll saying, you know what to do, boys, sharing it around, trying to skew the results, and it didn't work. Despite the fact they had shared among all of their cohorts, they could not actually get the votes on X to shift the poll in favor of Palestine. I explained to them it's because when a human being sees 30 replies all saying the same thing, they think this is everyone. But when I run a poll that actually has 80,000 responses, I don't need to look at each individual reply. I can see what the American people are thinking. I'm not saying I support Israel's actions or anything like that. I'm saying in general, Americans support Israel. And so this trend we see online, I believe, is largely bot accounts and sock puppets intended to mind break people like Jake Shields, who are not that smart, into chasing after a false narrative. If you are someone like Billboard Chris, leading the charge on an issue like gender ideology, it is in the interest of all of the far leftists to make sure he starts posting things that will get him banned and make literally no sense. So they spam attack you with bots, tell you, say the Jews instead. Some people fall for it.
I totally agree that online is not real life. It's way overrepresented there. But in my personal experience, I'm seeing an uptick in the real world as well.
Do you think that part of the reason why it
hold on,
seems like...
sorry, man. Where in the real world?
I was just at a trade show, the NRB, the National Religious Broadcasters Trade Show. And I spoke to a few people there, and almost everyone there is supportive of Israel. There were a lot of Jewish people there, a lot of Jewish trade show booths doing whatever. But some of these Christians that I spoke with on the down low were voicing objections, and I can see that they've been propagandized by what's been going on the last year.
Do you think that the reason that because I think that your perception is probably right, but it's my sense that the reason we here in the West see more anti-Semitism is a lot because of the internet, because anti-Semitism is very normal globally. I think that for a long time in the U.S., it was it was a small portion of people in the U.S. that kind of had anti-Semitic leanings, and I think that the reason why it seems more prevalent now is because of things like X and because of the whole interconnectivity that the internet allows. You're exposed to more cultures where anti-Semitism is completely normal. In Eastern Europe, if I understand correctly, Eastern Europe and throughout the Middle East and in Southeast Asia, it is totally normal to be like, oh yeah, obviously the Jews are bad, right? Obviously it's because of the Jews. That's a fairly common sentiment in a lot of places in the world. We haven't been exposed to it in the U.S. so much, or in the West so much, but I think that's part of why. What's your sense?
Well, for the left, and I will concede, I'm from Canada, and things are a little bit different there. I'm in the States a lot, but for them, racism isn't about color of your skin, it's about power. And for all of these leftists,
I agree.
They hate success. And the Jewish people have been very successful in spite of constant attacks throughout their history. So in British Columbia, where I'm from, we have this very far left government. And there was this hoax in Canada. A lot of you've probably talked about it on the show, the hoax of murdered Indigenous children from residential schools.
The mass graves, was it or something?
So it's not a grave. But the first report was from Kamloops, British Columbia. I happened to be driving through Kamloops the day this news came out. Very, very strange coincidence. but there was a report that mass graves were found of 215 murdered Indigenous children from this Catholic residential school. And so very quickly, for more than 100 years, from these Indian reserves, the children were sent to residential schools, oftentimes against the will of their families, oftentimes with the will of their families as well. And some of these schools were even on these Indian reserves. But it was to get more of a secular education, right? And they were run by Catholics. And for sure, yes, there was some abuse because people throughout the history of the human race, sometimes they're abusive. But there's no evidence that all these kids were murdered. There are no missing reports and all that sort of stuff. So there was this report because ground penetrating radar had detected 215 anomalies in the soil. Immediately, someone speculated, these are the bodies of dead, murdered Indigenous children. The media picked up on it. The Washington Post reported that children as young as 3 years old were found in mass graves. And this news went around the world in a heartbeat. You know the expression, a lie travels around the world while the truth is still put in our pants on. So that's the case with this. But all across Canada, this became a huge thing. Other reservations did the same thing. They used ground penetrating radar, which also detected anomalies, but they weren't doing any excavations. This whole thing was just speculation. A few small excavations have been done now. They haven't found anything. They've spent tens of millions of dollars trying to prove this hoax. They won't dig up the graves in Kamloops because they know when they find nothing, that's the end to the money. This is a huge grift. And billions of dollars have been put aside for reconciliation. This is a huge money-making opportunity by pretending to be victims. And I bring this up because a conservative woman in British Columbia, a member of the Conservative Party, was just kicked out of her party for saying that no bodies were found. She was kicked out of the Conservative Party for telling the truth. Then another conservative came along and he said, intergenerational trauma is a true thing. I was a teacher. Some of these Indigenous kids can't even walk into a school. Well, why is an intergenerational trauma a problem for Jewish people? They've had more intergenerational trauma than anyone. But all these other people, it's a huge problem. And now we have to drive these leftist narratives that they need all this support and they need all this money. And we make excuses for them. But with the Jewish people, they've always been successful. And America gets criticized across the globe because they're successful, more successful than any other nation. And that's why you get all the hate you get all across Canada and Western Europe. And I think it's the same for Israel when we should be praising the success. But I think that's why they get the hate.
We're going to go to Super Chats, so smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Join Rumble Premium. Go to timcastpremium.com, and it will set you up to sign up for Rumble using promo code TIM10. You get $10 off your annual membership. We got big news coming next week. It's going to be big fun. A lot of cool stuff is in the works, and the Uncensored Show will be coming up at 10. You can also join our Discord server. Don't just be a passive observer of the news. Be an active participant. Go to timcast.com, click Join Us. Sign up for that Discord server so that you can hang out with over 20,000 individuals. And many of you are wondering how to be involved and to do more. Sometimes all it takes is start that conversation make some new friends, be involved, and you never know what you might invent, create, discover, whatever. Before we do go to Super Chats, though, I want to give an update on this. I posted this tweet I really didn't think would get so much traction and people would be so interested. I made a video on my morning news channel about the skate park we set up in Martinsburg and the updates. And I'll give you a quick update here for those that missed it, but apparently the tweet's getting a lot of attention, and even Megyn Kelly chimed in, and a lot of people are chiming in. But the reason I posted this update, first and foremost, is because the city of Martinsburg contacted me that they wanted me to effectively bar people from using the property. Of course, so here, I'll give you the quick version. We live in the West Virginia area. We live in West Virginia, and we're relatively close to Martinsburg. It's basically our city. We're not in the city. We own property in the city. We were setting up the first Casper there, which has been, still may happen, but things are changing in the structure. We want to set up a skate park. The plan was to invest $300,000 in a privately owned public park, which basically means we got a property. It's got a building on it. It's got a big spot. We were going to put up a skate park. We would control it privately, but we'd let anybody use it. It wasn't going to cost money. It was going to be outdoors. It already has what's called a DIY on it, which is people who had lived there had built stuff. The people who are there took issue with us purchasing it, started spreading a rumor that we did it solely for the intention of owning them, which many on the right thought was pretty funny. They were like, wow, based move, Tim. They kicked you out of the park, so you bought it from them. Well, the reality is it takes a long time to buy property. We had been looking to buy property in Martinsburg for a long time. A grandfathered-in skate park makes the most sense. We never threatened to destroy it. We were going to protect it and keep it open. The individuals who run it are far left. And I can tell you this now explicitly because they threatened me to my face and accosted me and my wife at the local Cracker Barrel with a man and a woman, and the woman explicitly saying we made the space unsafe for marginalized people or LGBTQ people or whatever, which is nonsense. And they said it's because we're anti-trans that the people who skate there are now threatened or whatever, which is all a lie. The locals who skate there are our friends. They skate in our private facility. So as of right now, what's been going on is I've been told by the locals that these individuals have been vandalizing the property. They're struggling to keep up with it. They've been spray painting graffiti, racial slurs, and gang signs now. We decided we were just going to sell it. It's not going to work. And this guy literally, it was a couple months ago, got in my face and threatened me several times while screaming, spitting on me, and etc. And in a Cracker Barrel, no less. So I was just like, look, I'm not going to do this update. I'm not going to make a video. We're not going to talk about it. List the property. We're done. We're out. They win. They can have it. So we listed it to just get rid of it. We're not going to do the skate park. In the video I did, I showed that we built a $100,000 mini ramp at our Freedomistan Boonies facility. That was going to be effectively in this city for people to use and skate. I was told by the locals if we tried to build wood, these individuals would burn it down. In fact, shortly after that, someone set a fire at the property. So the city reached out to me, and I don't know why. I was told some rumors where they wanted to purchase it, who knows what. Well, I was told by the city that it's gotten out of control. There's feces, there's damage. The people there are crossing over and stealing property from other people, and that they're no longer going to tolerate it. Either I bar everybody and allow the city to enforce the removal of individuals. He mentioned he mentioned homeless people. I don't know to what extent. Or they would give us a maintenance violation for allowing this stuff to happen, putting us in an impossible position. Do I say, okay, fine, do your thing? And then these people, once again, who went to the front page of Washington Post and lied about everything, who don't even live here, don't even skate here, do they say Tim Pool has now shut the park down and kicked everybody out? I said, okay, screw it. I got off the phone with the guy. They said they're going to call me back. And I said, I'm just going to make a video explaining what's going on. This is what the far left does. This is who these people are. They've effectively destroyed our efforts to build a community project, to set up a skate shop community hangout. They don't want it to happen. These are people who online have expressed that skateboarding should not be in the Olympics, should not be a sport, should not have success, and it should only be reserved for outcasts and the dregs of society. Well, that's what you get. That's where we're currently at. So I don't know exactly what's going to end up happening, but I figured I would do the update because as much as I wanted to wash my hands of it, sell the property, and just pretend like it didn't happen, I figure now the best thing to do is just get in front of it PR-wise and explain where we're at. And this phone call that I got, maybe the city will be upset that I'm doing it. I don't know, but I'm done playing games. Allison and I went to a Cracker Barrel for breakfast. This guy waits out in front of the building for us, immediately coughs on me, spitting on me, screaming in my face in the middle of a Cracker Barrel, threatening in what I would describe as a threat of extreme violence, and for 20 minutes. So we ended up leaving, and there's nothing the city's going to do about it. There's nothing they can do about it. You've got a crazy person threatening us. We can't build concrete because our construction company said if they set up any concrete, it's going to get destroyed. They're already vandalizing the property. If we do wood, they're going to set it on fire, and then we've got a fire on the property. So they've really put us at a terroristic impasse where this is where we currently stand. So we'll see. I don't know what else comes next, but that's the update. And I have no problem with letting them know you win. There will be no skate park in the public for anybody to use. There will be no cleaning up of this derelict property. There will be no skate shop. They don't want it. We're not going to do it. I have no problem with them. I hope they all take their victory lap, but I hope everyone else outside of whatever this scumbag community is recognizes this is what is currently dominant in skateboarding and needs to be excised. If we want to have kids have a fun day at the park in the sunshine with a picnic, enjoying a sporting activity, be it skateboarding, rollerblading, scooting, I don't care what you're doing as long as it works. We can't have people destroying, taking dumps on the ground. This is the city told me there's feces everywhere. This is what they do to make sure that we can't have nice things. So here's where we're at. For the time being, we've unfortunately, as much as I didn't want to do this, we're doing a new park expansion internally because we have a security perimeter and armed guards. And that's the way we're going to have to live. Now, I can't speak to South Africa, but when I hear stories about how people have gated their communities and hired private security to protect themselves because of the crime. I hate to have to live that way. It's unfortunate that 2 years ago, when we bought property in Martinsburg, we weren't able to just say, here's a skate park. Because these people, you know what it really comes down to is it's a derelict property. The owners they didn't live in the area. And the people who were there felt like it was theirs to do whatever they want with. So when along comes dude to invest in and grow the project, they tried playing it. And you know, I got to tell you, all the leftist personalities lied. I want to give a shout out to every single left-wing podcaster who entertained their lies and destroyed the community project and made sure all that was left was a wasteland for Martinsburg. I want to make sure all of these liberal podcasts hear this. When they went out and they platformed these people and entertained the lies and let them destroy our attempts at cleaning up a park, what is left in the ruins of leftist psychotic ideology is a waste pit of human feces, drugs, and derelict individuals. That's what the left wants for you. When people of merit come in and say, can we clean this up and give the kids a nice place to live and grow up? They say no. They set fires. They take hammers to what we try to build. That's the left. Don't let them tell you otherwise. When the George Floyd riots happened, you had people in small towns putting up signs in their windows saying, please don't hurt us. Signs saying, please spare me. I'm a single mother. Go to Oakland. Take a look at what they write in their windows. The franchise shop sign saying, privately family owned, please don't destroy our building. That's the way they want you to live. Screw these evil scumbags and screw everyone who supported them. But you win. Congratulations. I'll give you that one. You're allowed to take a victory lap. You're evil. And let's go to your super chats and rumble rants. All right. Shane H. Wilder says what they did to the skate park just shows they would rather destroy all culture and community than accept that they are ideological deviants. Indeed. Go to their forums. Listen to what they say. They don't like the fact that there are people who wanted to make a profession out of a sport. There's an element of skateboarding that is happy that it has died. In the heyday and the end of the 2000s into the 2010, skateboarders were millionaires. There was talk of it entering the Olympics. The X Games were massive. Skateboarders were living the dream. Today, I think there's only around 10 or so professional skateboarders who make more than six figures from the sport, despite it being an Olympic sport and an international phenomenon. Go to China or Japan. They make way more money. There's way more interest, and it's expanding. And part of this, I have to say, goes to my tariff argument, because they started manufacturing skateboards in Mexico and China, and that helped to destroy the industry. But I digress. This is what they do. They want to make sure that we have nothing and we can't regrow it. All right. Anyway, Tyler Today News says, love the show, Tim. I watch every night. Could you shout out Tyler Today News and Outworld Live with Joey Cannoli? We try to contribute to the Discord. Shout out Tyler Today News and Joey Cannoli. We'll get you guys on the show too. We've got, for those that don't know, in the Discord server, several podcasts have launched. Imagine this. You sign up for Timcast.com Discord server. You enter the space and there's tens of thousands of people. You talk and people respond. Then you say, hey, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to start talking with a microphone, and people are already there to listen. It's fantastic. It is like a club, man. And so we've got the Quiet Part podcast with Sinoski. We've got Roma Nation, and we've had Roma Nation on IRL, and we're going to have Sinoski on IRL. I believe we're having him tomorrow. Are we having him tomorrow? Maybe. But we are. And the idea is to decentralize the space, give people an opportunity to spread their wings. And we're doing the same thing with the Culture War. We want to do the Culture War show live in person with you as members joining the show end of April. But now it looks like it's going to be beginning of May because our venue was booked. So, but yeah, man, hopefully we can get all the good homies who support the Discord community and are building culture, because this is the whole point. I went on that rant about the skate park community. We bought this property. It's 5 acres. It's already got a park on it. It's got a building. The people in the building were planning to leave. We wanted to put a skate shop there, snacks, video games, a couch, a hangout. You come, you hang out. That's where we build community. Skate park outside, open to the public, sign a waiver, and we should be fine. They destroyed all that. The Discord is another opportunity, at least online. The other thing we want to do is with the Cast Brew Coffee franchises, my goal outside of running this show and doing everything we do online is to create some way that you all listening can make friends with each other, because it was hanging out in bars and pubs where the founding fathers fomented a revolution. That is the first step. Our culture is dying because everybody's going to TikTok and watching 10-second videos. I know they're literally a minute or 2 minutes, but you get the point. They're not connecting to something. Let's grab some more. What do we got here? Over on the Rumble Rants. Let's, Flan the Man says, stay strapped, ladies and gentlemen.
Indeed.
Thomas Massey working on that nationwide constitutional carry. So I would just stress. I recommend what's the insurance company? The gun insurance thing?
USCCA is one of them.
Yeah, it's cheap and they cover all of your legal and expenses and everything. Really, really great.
Yep.
The most important thing, though, is know your laws because some states are very evil.
Yep.
And Maryland, for example, I'll tell you how evil they are. They will tell you blanket. Long guns are fine. They're legal. You can just you have to separate the ammo from the weapon in different compartments in your car. But then they have a specific list of weapons they've banned specifically. So they might tell you, and they did this to me. We checked and it said, long guns are fine. I then find out the specific long gun that I had was banned by itself. And it made no sense. It's the M1A in Maryland. It's considered an assault weapon. And I'm like, what? Wooden stock 10 round magazine? Makes no sense. And so you might think, oh, I'm fine. I'm doing everything normal. I'm going to go hunting. Nope. Serious crime. Some of these states are very evil. Let's go. All right. We'll grab some more. What is this? Pinochet says, sad about no shutdown. You see, Tim Rusfalt, head of OMB, would wield the power of 15 Elons dual-wielding Javier Malays with real chainsaws in a shutdown. More damage than Elon could dream of. One Democrat said they can't fire you during the shutdown. Oh, they don't understand. Elon can still work if he chooses to. You're not paying people, but he can still show up. So I think they realized they couldn't do the shutdown then because Doge would have no one to stop them. Or nice. Nobody would be around to watch whatever it is they're doing. I know, it would have been great, right? All right, what do we got? Soapy Enigma says, hey, Phil, when is the band going on the Warp Tour?
Oh, we're not doing Warp Tour this year, that's for sure.
Is there a Warp Tour?
There is going to be a Warp Tour this year, yeah. The last time we did...
They brought it back?
Yep, they did.
What?
I believe Falling in Reverse is headlining it.
That can't be true. It just means like a one-time thing, right?
I think it's a tour.
Not like they're going around the country.
I think it's Warp Tour 2025. Wow.
Really?
People really just can't move on.
It ended because of COVID, right?
Not really. No, I mean, it was kind of just not relevant anymore way before that.
Yeah. I always liked they had mini ramps there.
No, it looks like they have 4 stops. There's Washington, D.C., Long Beach, and Orlando.
Really?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah. I mean, like Avril Lavigne's on it, All Time Low, Angel Dust, Ask Alexandria. Yep. Big Ass Truck, Bless the Fall, Bowling for Soup, Boys Like Girls.
Bowling for Soup?
Yeah.
Wow.
Comeback
What
Kid,
did they do? Did they do
Escape the
Stacy's
Fate.
mom? No, who did Stacy's mom?
Ice Nine is going to be on it.
Well, look at that.
Let's see.
Soapy says, Tim, Booney's content is still lacking as well as the Discord. Also just bought 6 boards. Now I have 14 from Booney's HQ. I'm going to say this too. Everything we're doing is connected. Okay? Booney's HQ. You know what they said to me? See that skateboard? See that skateboard? They told us, buy China. You'll save like $5 a board. And I said, what do I do with the $5? And they're like, I don't know. Buy yourself a cheeseburger? I'm like, I don't need a cheeseburger. How about this? How about I spend $5 more for the board and give Americans jobs making skateboards? To be fair, no one really said this to me. The distributors came and said, here's your options. China, America. China's $5 cheaper. I said America. I said, sounds good. No one was actually trying to pressure us to do this. I don't want to insult anybody we're working with. But the point is, the general idea is, if you go with China, to be fair, I did have some people say, you will save money on the Chinese boards, right? And they are good. I'm not kidding. They're really good. The American boards are the exact same quality, but they're a little bit more expensive. Most companies say, go with the cheaper board, and then we'll keep the profits. I don't do that. We give our pro riders the biggest royalty in the industry. We sell our boards $10 cheaper than the pros, and we still make profit. And the profit off the boards, we reinvest into expanding the culture, the community, and the marketing. Booney's HQ. But as to your question or to your point, we just brought on 2 of my buddies, Andy and Brandon, shout out, who have been cranking up the content. We've been filming. We just put up a vlog today. We just got to get to it. We got to do the work. That's really it. Cody and Julia will be here. I think they're here now, actually. And everyone was it's funny because these lefties are like, "We're your friends, Tim," and I'm like, "Moving, like buying furniture. We're adults." Like I don't know what you mean. And then the other thing too is because I post skate videos and it's me doing a trick, and they're like, "How come no one else is doing tricks with you?" And I'm like, "Because they're filming. They're standing there." But they try to make But we do have more people coming, more locals joining to film with us, and the content should be ramping up. We just put up the video that went up today was the professional pogo stickers. Homie did a front flip over the Cybertruck on a pogo stick. Dude, it's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, it's the coolest thing ever. No joke.
It's not just a regular pogo stick. That thing is like supercharged pogo stick.
He landed it?
Yeah.
Kept pogoing?
And kept pogoing. And then after he did it, he did another flip. Yo, it's crazy. And then there's one trick that they do, because I don't know what it's called, but his head is probably 12 feet in the air. That's how high these things go. And he did a front flip over the pogo stick, like a cartwheel over it in midair. Nuts. It's absolutely wild to watch. And then when they bail, they're like 10 feet up. It's crazy. Maybe 8 or 9 feet. So they jump and then they miss and they throw it and they just fall. And I'm like, jeez, dude. But it's really amazing to watch this stuff. Dude used the pogo stick to front. He jumped on the pogo stick, ditched the stick, and front flipped onto our shipping container, and then walked to the edge and did a side tuck off. This was really fun stuff, really amazing stuff. See, we're getting there. A lot of fun stuff is coming. Let's go. What do we have here? Carlos Y says, "Preach, Chris. Tell them how Alberta would join the USA. Tim Pool's $100K per person idea would be a slam dunk, especially since that money would be going to new Americans."
Dude, I've thought of this. 100 grand per Canadian times 40 million. What is that? That is, someone help me out here. That's 40 billion. That's 400 billion. That's $4 trillion. For $4 trillion, you could give every single Canadian $100,000 American, which is 150,000 Canadian. And we'd have lower taxes.
Buy the country.
And you know what, Tim? I'd be able to carry pepper spray to defend myself.
See, that's why
I can't even do that.
There's a lot of states in the U.S. you can't do that either.
I can't carry anything for the purpose of self-defense.
In Illinois, the only thing I think you're legally allowed to carry is a gun now, and it's only because of the D.C. versus Heller ruling. It used to be before this that the only legal weapon was a rubber switch. So it couldn't be more than 2 feet long, and it's a stick of rubber with a bead on it, and that was the only legal thing you could use to defend yourself. That's right.
$4 trillion. That's like 2 Biden deficits. That's it. Nothing.
Well, how many people are in Alberta?
Oh, maybe, I don't know, 4 million, something like that.
Really?
I don't know. It's going to be something like
that. So for that,
Alberta is really, there's 2 major cities. There's Edmonton up further north. There's Calgary.
4.2 million.
Yeah, there's some other really great cities. Alberta's fantastic. Those are real people in Alberta.
So what is that, 400 billion?
Well, no, for every Canadian, it would be 4 trillion.
No, but if just Alberta.
Oh.
It'd be 400 billion.
Well, no, 4 million times 100,000 is
400 billion.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
I just subtracted.
Yeah.
Zero.
Yeah, not hard.
I say we buy Alberta. Think about all the oil we get.
Well, you can't leave British Columbia.
I don't want to risk it.
You can't leave BC.
I don't want them voting in America.
BC makes a lot of sense. That's where Vancouver is, right?
Yeah, that's where I am.
Because then we connect Alaska to the contiguous United States. They will join us.
And we have a lot of resources, and you need a pipeline going to the coast.
That's true. And then we can invade Alaska.
LNG facilities, we should be building those.
LNG?
Liquefied natural gas.
Oh, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, deal. How many people are in British Columbia?
More. Just Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley is like 5 million.
This is actually an interesting question. Saying that we're going to annex Canada is silly because people vote. But what do you think? I got to be honest. I'm pretty sure that if Trump offered $100,000 cash to each citizen, they would vote for annexation.
I would.
I think you'd get like 60% at least.
That's my family of 4. That's 600,000 Canadian dollars.
Yep.
And I get
children included.
And I get freedom of speech and a better constitution.
To be fair,
my life doesn't change.
$4 trillion. What's the annual budget? $7 trillion.
The U.S. Yeah.
Yeah. The inflation would be tremendous.
Yeah, but you look at this as an investment, okay? And you look at what your return on investment is, how much you're going to generate each year. It's nothing. You could even get private people to finance it.
Yeah, and to be fair, in the U.S., about 45% of everyone's money is taxed. So it's not just income; it's sales, it's property, it's gas tax, whatever. They estimate around, for the average person, I think 45%. So we could have that back.
Honestly, Canada would be a steal for $250,000 each. 10 trillion. It's still a steal. But it's not going to happen.
We could probably. I got to be honest. I bet if Trump said I'll give $20,000 to each Canadian, I'm not kidding.
It wouldn't happen.
I
can't communicate to you guys how the culture and atmosphere is up there right now, but it wouldn't happen. But you got to up the bid. Everyone's got a price.
What percent of Canadians are actually conservative?
0.
Well, I live
it's not
there.
0.
Well, by U.S. standards, so 1.
Actually conservative, 15.
15%. And then what about like
real conservatism? Yeah.
But what about maybe like moderate post-liberal who think the wokeness has gone too far?
Oh, well, wokeness, this is a different issue.
Right. That's why I'm
Wokeness is
asking.
the far left 10%. I get 90% support for what I do in Canada. So
Okay, if that's
people
the
don't
case,
like wokeness.
If that's the case, I'm willing to bet if Trump said $20,000 in your account overnight, even your children, if you're a family with 3 kids underage, we'll give you $60,000 into your joint account. I'd be willing to bet you go to over 50% voting for annexation.
I'm going to need a cabinet position tasked with destroying gender ideology, and then I'll agree.
I'm not saying you have to agree, but I think
all the immigrant communities aren't down with wokeness.
Right.
And this speaks to a larger issue when speaking about issues generally. The Asian community, the Hispanic community, the Black community, the Indian community, they don't like any of this woke nonsense.
I'm just saying any country, if Donald Trump goes to, you name the country and says, we want you to be a part of America.
Greenland.
You will be free to travel the United States. You have a U.S. passport. You will have access to U.S. economics. You can come here, get jobs, move here. Mm-hmm. And we're going to give you $20,000. They're all voting yes.
We already have a brain drain in Canada. It's called the brain drain because tons of people take, the doctors and the successful business people, they're all going south all the time.
Yeah, we get your comedians. We got Ryan Reynolds. He's Canadian, right?
We
got Seth Rogen.
It's probably our best export is our comedian.
We got Dave Foley.
Jim Carrey.
Ryan Long. Danny Polishchuk. That's right. We own your comedians.
We have a lot, and yes, they all come to America.
Why is that?
Look, Canada's great and everything, but let's be serious. We need Greenland, not Canada. Greenland is strategic. Canada is, a friend to the north, and we can remain friends.
The problem with Canada is the Canadians. The territory's great. Oil, access, caribou, you name it.
Look, we just need to get proper education into the education system, and we can fix this.
There you go.
I figured it out. We get Canada and Greenland, but wait, we take all the Canadians and put them in Greenland.
There's something to be said for empires when they have excellent leadership. The British Empire was a civilizing force for the world.
It's true.
Yeah,
it was.
It was.
And unfortunately, they were weak.
Listen, all you leftists out there, it was the British Empire that ended slavery globally, and it became a regional.
But they turned into a bunch of effeminate silly ninnies.
Yes.
I hear you talk about civil war a lot, and we're not in an environment where we're going to have that or Western Europe yet, but things get to a point, maybe in 50 or 60 years.
In North America, in the United States?
In Western Europe in particular, mass immigration is not working.
Yeah, 50, 60 years is way too far.
But the politicians aren't going to stop it. But it always has to get to absolute disaster area before people stand up and start to revolt.
Nope.
And there will be a revolt.
It does not need
They're
to be
not
disaster.
even close. Look, they tried to do this in England. What happens? People get put in jail and then everyone's silent.
So
They try to speak up against mass immigration.
The example I always give.
They go to jail.
The example I always give. The Civil War started with the Battle of Fort Sumter in South Carolina. That's where we mark the line in history. This started the Civil War. After that happened, we had the Battle of Bull Run, and people were picnicking on the battlefield because they did not think civil war was possible. Nothing had gotten so bad to that people believed fighting could happen. Why? There was no great disaster. And then what happened? People were picnicking and bullets were flying and heads were getting blown off. And still, the funny thing is,
Different time.
but the question is, why would they think civil war was not possible when they were already in the civil war, according to history.
I mean, we're in a war right now. It's a different type of war. It's an information war. It's psychological warfare.
Is it? A bunch of people just got swatted and Tesla dealerships getting set on fire and shot up. Someone tried to kill the president of the United States twice. Or, I'm sorry, on 2 different occasions, someone tried to take the life of the president. One almost succeeded. And the funny thing is, that bullet that grazed Trump's ear, the response from everyone was 1 millimeter away from civil war. If that's the case,
I don't agree.
I think the issue is people become accustomed and adapt to their circumstances in history. That's why I always call it the time travel test, that if I went back 10 years and explained to you everything that's going on right now, you'd say, you're lying. 10 years ago,
I wouldn't have believed you that I was going to stand on the street as a human sandwich board talking about people trying to change the sex of children. Yes, you're absolutely right, Tim. I wouldn't have believed you.
So
Western Europe's a bigger concern even than Canada right now.
Western Europe is going to fall much sooner, in my opinion.
And I think there will be, I don't know what a civil war looks like in this day and age. It's not like the old days. But at some point,
I think you'd be surprised.
At some point, the people inviting mass Islamization of their countries, when they try to turn countries into Sharia law, there will be a pushback and there will be fighting and there will be war. And then finally, parties like the ADF will rise to power and they'll fix it.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I'm not sure I completely agree. We're going to go to the Uncensored show in a second, but I'll give one final thought before we do. In New York City, I think, how many, what do they have, 30,000 NYPD?
Something along the lines, yeah. It's like the 4th or 5th biggest army.
Do you know how many people live in Manhattan? Just Manhattan, not even Brooklyn, Queens, or the Bronx or Staten Island, just Manhattan.
I looked this up. It's 12 million?
No, just Manhattan.
7.
So,
I want to say 7 million.
Okay.
It's 2.5.
Okay.
So you've got 5 boroughs, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island.
Okay.
The entirety of New York, I believe, is like 9 million, and the metro, I think, is 12 or 13. Manhattan Island alone, I'm pretty sure, is like 2 to 2.5. There may have been a net loss because of COVID. If 10% of Manhattan Island decided to go out organized with baseball bats, there are not enough police in New York City to deal with it.
But that's not how these movements ever start. It's always a small number.
And my point is, 10% of Manhattan would call 250,000 people. If 1% went out, there's not enough police to stop it. 25,000 people organized, marching through with violent intent, are not going to be stopped by 30,000 police officers who are dispersed across the entire city.
Right.
People underestimate the size of population needed to overthrow a country. Which brings me to the 3%ers, who say it was only 3% of the American population that actually fought for a revolution. But we're going to go to the members-only uncensored portion, so smash the like button, share the show with everyone you know. Join Rumble Premium because we're going to be uncensored at rumble.com/Timcast IRL. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Billboard Chris, do you want to shout anything out?
Yeah, I just would like to give the message that there's no such thing as a transgender child. They're called girls and boys, and they're beautiful just as they are. No drugs or scalpels needed. And if people want to support me in my global mission, that would be great. They can do so through my website, billboardchris.com.
Right on.
You can find me tomorrow and every Monday through Friday on Pop Culture Crisis at 3 p.m. Eastern. So go over there and subscribe. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Mary Archived.
I am Phil That Remains on Twix. I'm Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains. New record dropped on January 31st. It's called Anti-Fragile. You can pick it up. You can check it out on YouTube, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Spotify, Pandora, and Deezer. Don't forget the left lane is for crime.
We're going to see you all in just about 30 seconds. Rumble.com/TimcastIRL uncensored. Thanks for hanging out.